call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, June 21st to order. And I'll start by saying, Umbawastich. On behalf of the town of Canmore, I acknowledge that today we recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. The town of Canmore is located within the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge the area known as Shooting at Willows and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Iarhe Nakota, comprised of the Bearspaw First Nation, Chiniki First Nation, and Wesley First Nation, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We acknowledge all nations who live, work, and play, and help us steward this land. Today, we honor the people who have been here since time immemorial, and from whom we have much to learn. We celebrate a future in which we live together in reconciliation, but we keep an eye on the past to remind ourselves of the work that must still be done. There is no reconciliation without truth. I, along with the town of Canmore's council and administration, am committed to living and working in right relations, and we are committed to advancing truth and reconciliation. Today and every day, we honor and recognize the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. Now, turning to the agenda for today, are there any changes?
Mayor Krauser, there's one potential change. Due to the timing change of this meeting,
Wow, that's
nice. New. We had a, do you want me to start this?
Oh, I think that there's a, there's a feedback.
No, he's muted.
We are gathered here today to get through this thing called life.
It was Whitney. I just know the words.
I have always wanted to do that.
Oh, you should have. It should have been you. I'll keep trying while you guys play with the speaker. Yeah. And hopefully admin doesn't have to talk much today. But with the timing change of this meeting, which is usually at 1, we had a mistake with Bow Valley Victim Services. So they're not planning to be here till 1. So we may be able to reschedule them to come just to this meeting later, or we may need to postpone that item. So we'd ask that for now you move to B2 and we return to B1 at the end of the meeting and see what we need to do.
All right.
Okay.
We'll do that. Thank you. With that noted, I will move that we approve the agenda. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And now we're going to have some introductions. Ms. Rogers.
Good morning. I'm very excited today to introduce you to 2 new team members for the Corporate Services Leadership Team. On the screen, we have Shravan Popuri, who is our new Manager of Information Technology. Shravan is currently a resident of Montreal, and he's been working with CN prior to joining the town. He joined us in April, but has been working remotely as he's relocating in July. So Shravan has led the technical delivery of programs and projects that delivered safety-critical, customer-facing, and internal use systems and applications across multiple business units with CN. He's worked in customer service, technology operations, business operations, and regulatory compliance. And Shravan is also a certified train conductor, which not many people can say. So welcome, Shravan.
Welcome, Mr. Popuri.
Thank you. And my second exciting... are you
trying to speak?
Do you want to say a word? Yep. I don't know, Shravan, if you do.
Yeah, I'll also thank you, Therese. And
hello, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Do you hear me?
There we go.
Okay, thank you, Therese, and good morning, and I'm very happy to meet you all, the members of the council. Really looking forward to working with you all and being in Canmore and interacting with you on a regular basis. Thank you.
Great, well, and good luck with your move, and thank you for jumping onto the Canmore train.
Thank you.
My second exciting introduction was Palki Business. Manager of Finance. She'll be leading the charge while Chelsea is away on maternity leave, enjoying time with her baby sometime midsummer. Palki is a seasoned senior financial professional who has a master's in both engineering and business administration, and she joins us from the city of Airdrie, where she's been the team lead for budget and financial planning. Palki also worked at the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo as a financial analyst and an auditor. So please join me in welcoming Palki.
Welcome to Canmore and welcome to council.
Thank you.
Or
Very
committee of the
excited.
whole.
Yes, thank you so much. Looking forward to working with all of you.
Great, and you certainly are jumping in and going to be jumping right into the fire with budget time coming up.
And
so.
big shoes to fill. So.
Yeah, very good, very good. Great, thank you very much. Before we move into our delegations, are we okay with the sound system? Has something been turned up, or are we?
We're not exactly sure. We're trying a couple different things. It's new.
Okay, all right. I mean, I think that we're louder, which is good, but obviously we're getting some feedback. So. All right, well, we will proceed then. As noted, item B1, we shall leave to the end of the meeting to deal with at that time. And so we will move to item B2, the delegation from the Bow Valley Connection Center. Ms. Lambert, welcome to council.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Town Council. Good morning, guests. So before I begin, I just thought I would share with you why I'm here and how I got to be here. I've been a long-term resident of Canmore for 34 years. In that time, I worked for a local developer, and I did the marketing and the sales for the first affordable housing back in the mid-90s, late 90s. So I'm familiar with the challenges of housing, and I commend everyone for continue to work through those challenges. So what brings me here now is I have a 19-year-old son who has autism, ADHD, and bipolar disorder. And for the last 3 years, I have been paying close attention to what is going to happen to him and others like him in our community after they're done school. Right now, we have no formal supports in place. And so I'm advocating for Bow Valley Connection Center and the neurodiverse community here in the Valley. So that brings me to Bow Valley Connection Center. We're a not-for-profit organization. We create opportunities. Oops.
I think it'll just be a moment for it to get up on the screen.
Okay. Just wait a few minutes.
It'll.
Is it loading? So Bow Valley Connection Center, we're a not-for-profit organization in the Valley. We've been registered, not-for-profit registered since 2014. We've been servicing the neurodiverse community since 2012. We continue to grow. Our focus so far has been just on social programming, after school and evening programs.
Great.
So our mission is creating opportunities to best support our neurodiverse.
Yeah. So tell you what, we'll get this figured out. We're not going to hold this time against you, so don't feel rushed.
Okay. Oh,
There we go. Now it's up there.
okay.
And don't worry, we'll give you a couple of extra minutes because
Okay.
of that. So.
I'm just watching the time. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so I just put a little PowerPoint presentation to hopefully help. Everything that you see in green here is things that we continue to do. And like I said before, we became a not-for-profit registered charity in 2014. We began our social programs in 2012. Our primary focus is offering one-time-a-week social-based get-togethers. We continue to do that today. We have small participant numbers. Back then were ages 12 to 18. We're now servicing people 12 to 70 years of age. We have no paid employees. We all work as volunteers. We are a parent-run board of directors, which we continue to be today. And now our COVID-related grants and supports are ending, which brings me to the next slide. So as you can see, we are growing our programs. They grow annually. We are reaching ages 12 to 70 years of age. Our primary growth area has been the 18 to 30. And so because of that, we're really focusing on the kids that are finishing school and have no routine or no schedule or no programs. And because of that, we applied recently for a grant, and we're initiating our first vocational training and placement program, so we're excited about that. So our achievements to date, we've been small, yet we've been quite impactful. Our operating budget is based on bottle drives and silent auctions and dances and anything we can to earn some money to keep us going. And we've been very successful in that, given that, you know, the budget's small. But that leads to the question of, you know, most of our operating monies are spent for the programs. We offer the social and life skill programs now. And like I said, we're expanding to vocational training and placement. We have achieved a really good sense of community and belonging for the neurodiverse people. They have a place to come together and be with one another. A lot of these people don't have, you know, extended friendships past their families. We've enhanced their quality of life. We've given them opportunities to, you know, learn how to play with one another, communicate with one another, and actually get along with one another. And we've created a greater sense of independence and communication abilities amongst them. So today our goals are to deliver cost-effective, sustainable weekday programs. Again, we're focusing on the 18 to 30 age range. They have no place to go. You often see them, you know, walking around town, and there's no real sense of anchor for them. We're wanting to expand the programming further right now we have a grant that we can support 3 people, but there's probably 8 or 9 that could be out in the workplace doing some volunteering. And we want to expand our community relations and our partnerships in the community. What I see is really important right now is the PDD provincial funding. It's not doing what it can do. Right now it's all family-based or family-managed support, so each family gets their own PDD funding. So PDD funding is persons with developmental disabilities. And those people qualify only if their IQ measures at 70 or less. So there is, what I see, and the province has identified this as well as, you know, the IQs between 70 and 90 or 70 and 100, those people are being missed, yet they still need supports. So how I see this is, you know, there'll be a greater bang for the buck if I can work with the province of Alberta and streamline the PDD funding to not only reach the people with the lower IQs, but also the people with the mid IQs that still need that support. And we need to operate in a safe, conducive, and consistent facility. Right now, we've been here, there, and everywhere in the community: playgrounds, parks, gymnasiums, churches, the basement of the Legion, and unfortunately, they're not all wheelchair accessible, and it's not conducive. It's limiting some of our participants from joining in on the programs. So this is this slide sort of pertains to more of the bigger picture. I'm aiming for a life campus as well as permanent supportive housing. So today I'm looking for the town of Canmore just to advocate on my behalf to have this kind of come to fruition in the next couple of years. I'm not looking at anything long-term today. I am and have been working with Bow Valley Regional Housing for the last 2 years. I got a little piece of good news this morning from Ian, and he's supportive of the permanent supporting housing initiative. So I'm really excited to see where that can go. And like I mentioned earlier, the province of Alberta, the funding, the PDD side, I'm going to continue communications with them to see where we can take that. And obviously for the permanent supportive housing aspect, working with Alberta Social Housing Corporation in an advocacy role there as well. So today, what's limiting us today is space availability. Our participants need predictable routine and accessibility to play an integral part in the participants to meet their full potential. We need weekday wheelchair accessible, ventilated, natural light to the outdoors. A conducive location. Like I said, most of our participants have low IQs, so they will not be driving anytime. And so we must be able to walk or depend on family, friends, and public transportation. So a space that's within walking distance of the downtown core is ideal. Grants, fundraising, philanthropic dollars pay for our program expenses, leaving us little to be able to afford paying for even not-for-profit rental space. So today, I'm not looking for in-kind space. What I was asking for the town of council is to consider a process that we could apply for and other not-for-profit organizations could apply for in-kind space. We don't have a process per se. You just have a dollar figure attached to each of your physical spaces. And for us, it's not affordable, unfortunately, and it is limiting our program enhancement opportunities. So I did break it down. So immediate support assessing an interim space for day programming, 18 to 24 months is our time frame. I'm looking for the Life Campus and the permanent supportive housing to take 2 to 4 years. Things kind of move slow these days. But in the coming months, I'm asking the town of Canmore to get involved in working with me in Bow Valley Regional Housing as part of the master plan for the Life Campus and the housing component. And long-term, 2 to 5 years, I'd like to put a committee together to work towards this Life Campus and housing initiative. So thank you very much. And I just see this as all of us working together to create a sense of belonging for our neurodiverse community. I think there's great opportunities that we can create to support one another and become more of an inclusive community.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today and your patience with our technological issues that are now resolved. And thank you for your message today. I just want to say that I attended the screening in Arts Place of the video piece on neurodiversity, and it was spectacular.
Thank you.
It really, really was good. I love the paradigm shift to neurodiverse because it really does go to that. It's about all of us being on different places on the spectrum, and at each place on the spectrum, there's wonderful gifts and skills available that can contribute to community. And it's not about one being lesser or more than, it's about us all being different, and we all have different needs, and that's what you're talking about today.
Yeah, and I think, thank you, Mayor. I think, if there's proper fits and we we screen our individuals for their needs and what their interests are, we can find a place for them in our community.
Great. And I know that there'll be likely questions from council unless I steal their thunder. I just have a couple of clarifying questions around the asks.
Okay.
So with regards to advocacy, I take it that it would be, any advocacy would be, working with you around what the messaging would be and adding our voice to that message. That's what
Absolutely.
you're looking for? Okay.
That would be really, it would really help. Just, I'm trying to create a committee, and, having a representative from the town of Canmore would be, I think, the proper thing to do.
Right, great. So with regards to the space, now when we've talked before, potential long-term space being explored in conjunction with Bow Valley Regional Housing,
Right.
of which you received some good news this morning. So what you're really looking at, I believe, is a bridge to go from now until then.
Yeah.
So that programming has a place until it can have its permanent home.
Yeah, so exactly. Nothing, I've learned in the last 2 years that this doesn't move as quickly as I'd like to. So, knowing that Bow Valley Regional Housing is supportive of this initiative, I realize it's going to take some time. There could be some fundraising campaign time necessary if we do get a building and we need to bring it up to code. So right now, to have our programs run successfully and really support that vocational training and placement, they need a place to, in a sense, call home. So, they train there, they come back and dialogue about their experiences, and there's a regular place. When they're jumping around from a playground to a gym to the basement of the Legion, it's really just not conducive, because they thrive on routine and predictability. And if they have that predictable space, that's one less thing they have to process, and they helps them regulate.
Yeah, well, that
Yeah.
sounds right. And the timing, I believe it was about 5 days a week for 4 to 5 hours a day.
I think at this point, we would be happy even with 2 afternoons.
Like,
we could start small.
It's not talk about taking a space over and holding it permanently for some period of time. You're talking about having access to a space some days a week at certain times during the day.
Yeah, something just predictable, schedulable. Schedulable, is that a word?
It is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something that we can schedule our programs and our support people to come in on those particular days and times.
Right, and that they would have certainty as to that
Yeah.
they're used to this space.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Very
Yeah.
good. I don't look to council to see if there are any other questions. Councillor Ma.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Lambert.
You're welcome.
Going through here, you have currently about 18 registered members. Moving forward, could you forecast the need growing? I imagine it's only going to go up. Any rough numbers in your mind?
Yeah, I actually had a meeting with Chris McPhee, the superintendent of the school. He's also very supportive of this, because he's indicated to me as the principal of the OLS Catholic system that there's a number of children coming through the system that are going to need exactly what we're offering. And that's why we've expanded our programs to start at the ages of 12 versus 16, is we want to get them sort of part and parcel of this program, get them used to it, have some camaraderie develop, so that when they do get out of school, it's not a complete shock to them. So yeah, those numbers are going to grow. And the needs assessment that was done in 2018 identified 261 PDD people in the valley. We're not obviously getting that kind of turnout, but that a needs assessment was done, and that number was 261. So I don't have access to how those numbers were formulated, and so I don't know the accurate number of who else we can reach. But we can't reach and offer if we don't have a place and a thing to offer them.
Yeah.
you know, so there's going to be some public relations work, you know, involved as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I didn't really actually have a question. I guess I just wanted to add on to what Ms. Sorry, did I just say Borman? Oh my God. I went and saw that Maverick movie last night, so I think I'm living in another day. It's all the Kate Bush and everything else running around now. My apologies. That's not the first time I've done that, but I've managed to not do it for a while. It's a terrible habit. I just wanted to, now I've completely lost my train of thought, add to what Ms. Lambert had said or had inferred about with regards to Bownett Valley Regional Housing and some news from Ian, Mr. Wilson rather. We just completed our strategic planning a couple weeks ago, more than a couple weeks ago, June 1st and 2nd. And within our draft strategic plan that's meant to be approved, we have discussed exploration of looking for housing for our neurodiverse citizens in our community, which is, to be fair, something that we've actually been looking at for a while. I don't remember the number being 260, though.
That's the PDD.
Yeah, no, I remember the number more like 45. That would be requiring housing within the next 10 years.
That's the AISH. AISH is the housing funding. PDD is the program funding.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
We'll agree to disagree, because I know that in the housing needs assessment pretty good, and I don't remember it being that large. I remember it being under 25, basically.
Yeah, I read 24.
Okay, under 25 is what I just said, so over the next, anyways, but I don't remember it being, I guess I thought from that number you'd given that that's how many you'd be looking to house. It doesn't matter.
No.
Regardless. I just wanted to provide news to my colleagues, because we haven't had a chance to talk about this, and I opened up the agenda on the weekend just to let them know that this is something that BVRH is going to be looking at within the next 4 years of its strategic plan.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Councillor McCallum. And as I understand it, there's two aspects of the programming. There's the housing, which is the smaller numbers, and Bow Valley Regional Housing could have a role to play in that. And then there's the Life Campus programming, and that's a larger number that would have access to that. And that also may be, may be able to find a permanent home through Bow Valley Regional Housing, but obviously they have plans, and timing was not immediate, right?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. I guess I had a quick question to follow up to better understand the request, similar to the mayor. And when it comes to space identification and your process, have you already been looking in the community and identified space that you feel is appropriate? Or are you at the beginning of doing that process and want to work with like our facilities department to look at what we have, and that's the support you're looking for?
I would say a little of both. I have been doing some snooping around. We have worked in the multipurpose room at the old rec center. That's a really conducive space. It's probably bigger than what we need, but for a full program, that kind of size does work, like for drama. We've worked at the Origins, for their cooking facilities. I don't know if you guys have cooking facilities that, because we are looking at nutrition, health, and cooking.
We used to at the rec center.
Yeah. I think what's most important for our facilities is wheelchair accessibility, good lighting and ventilation, and access to outdoor window space. We've been operating a lot in the basement of the Legion, which has been complimentary space, which we are hugely grateful for, but it is very limiting for us, and it is too small for us. Yeah.
And then we do have policies around like facility rentals and like the fees we charge and nonprofits and local groups. Are those things that you've looked at, and are you looking for support there, or is that okay with you?
No, that's kind of where we get hung up, is most of our dollars are being used for our program expenses, and we have one hired staff right now. So that's where we're falling short, is we know that you guys have a not-for-profit fee for space rental. That's where we're running into a snag. We can't afford it right now.
And then have you looked at accessing grants through the town for?
Every year,
Yeah.
all the time, yes.
Perfect.
And we've been very successful in getting those grants, which, has helped sustain us, absolutely. We also do a lot of other grant applications where we are getting matching grants and so forth, and then we do our bottle drives, and we do that type of thing to maximize our dollars. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mayor Crowser. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Greatly appreciated. I wonder if you could help me understand the spectrum of neurodiversity that you're looking to help service. My understanding is between 30 and 40% of the population could be somewhat neurodiverse, which would put almost half of us up here
Yeah.
on the neurodiverse spectrum.
Well, so neurodiverse, I mean, that's a good question. What I'm speaking to are people, it's sadly that it's kind of evaluated on an IQ level, but it is. So neurodiverse for us is, IQs lower than 70 who qualify for PDD funding. There's also the 70 to 90 that don't qualify for PDD funding, but have things like autism, ADHD, ADD, high anxieties, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, Down syndrome. So they're, it's kind of a multifaceted. Some have, my son has autism, ADHD, and bipolar disorder. So, some of them have 2 or 3 diagnoses.
But basically, you're looking at IQ levels and where they fall.
Well,
within
that's
that
kind of
realm?
how, for the PDD funding and the AISH funding, it sort of kind of streamlines itself down to that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Ms. Lambert, you indicated that you'd been talking with CRPS and OLS, and that obviously there's some support from them, moral support anyway.
Yeah.
Are there any other sorts of supports that they'd be able to provide, space-wise or otherwise?
OLS or the school.
or CRPS.
I've approached the schools, and we've been turned down.
There's nothing.
A lot of it has to do with insurance, too.
Right, there's nothing there.
Being able to afford the additional insurances.
Okay.
So we have to, we have volunteers, and then we also have a program coordinator. So again, those program dollars get eaten up by, making sure we have the proper insurances in place.
Great. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. I just had a quick idea that I'm sure you have explored, but I thought I would ask it anyways. Have you any luck talking to the province about the Old Bow Valley College site?
The Opal Valley, I've never.
Bow Valley College.
Oh, Bow Valley
In the
College.
provincial building? Because that's been empty now for several years, since before COVID.
No, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I would, it's sitting empty and has been sitting empty for at least 2.5 years now.
Okay.
It might have a kitchenette.
Really? Okay.
I don't know. It's been a while since I've been wandering through there, so there'd be an office kitchenette maybe at max, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah. And
Okay.
if you need some.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time today. Now, the way that we deal with the request, we don't decide anything today. And in fact, I'm going to make a motion in a moment to put this on the agenda of the July 5th regular council meeting.
Okay.
So that we'll be able to, and at that point, there may be some final decision on it. There might be requests to administration to look at something. So we'll deal with it at that time, but it's, so that'll be July 5th. So just to
Okay.
And please, if there's any change in circumstances prior to that time, if you could perhaps maybe liaise with Ms. Brown and let her
Okay.
know if there's any change of circumstances that we should be aware of that would affect the request.
Okay, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I will put a motion on the table that the Bow Valley Connection Center's requests be considered at the regular meeting of council on July 5th, 2022. Any discussion with respect to that motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now turn to the minutes of May 17th, 2022 Cal meeting. And I've got to sign in again here. And I'm looking to council to see if there's any errors or omissions that have been noted. Seeing none, I'll move that we approve the minutes of May 17th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll now move to item D1 of staff reports, Summer 2022 Family Resource Network Pilot Project. If you could help me with the pronunciation of your last name. I'm going to take a guess. De Montigny?
Close, yeah.
Is that close?
De Montigny.
De Montigny. De Montigny. Ms. De Montigny, welcome to Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. All right, good morning, Mayor Krausert and members of council. I'm here to present to you today on the Family Connection Center pilot project called the Adventure Club. I wanted to give you a brief overview of what we'll talk about today. So I'm going to discuss the Family Connection Center and what that's made up of, the background details of how we arrived at developing the Adventure Club, and information about the Adventure Club, as well as next steps. So the Family Connection Center has two programs, the Family Resource Network programs and the Social Connection programs. The Family Resource Network programs has parent and caregiver supports, child development and family supports, as well as information and referrals. It is provincial grant funding for this program. The Social Connection programs is connecting children, youth, and families, and as well as child development based. It is municipally funded. So this is background information on how we arrived at the Adventure Club program. So the background details, we had surplus funding from the provincial grant, as well as we identified community gaps and needs. We had outcomes from the previous program we offered, the COVID relief programs, as well as community research. So I'm going to walk you through each one of these in a bit more detail. So the Family Connection Center receives provincial grant money, as well as municipally funded. Our provincial grant agreement is for 3 years, and it will end in March of 2023. We are currently in year 3 of our budget. With the provincial grant, there was a surplus from year 2 due to staff turnover and changes to programming because of COVID. A surplus of just over $7,000 from year 2 must be spent by the end of March. Going forward, it is not anticipated that we will have a surplus of funding from our provincial grant. When there is a surplus of funding from our provincial grant, we look at community needs and areas there may be gaps in services. We collect data by talking to parents and families and other organizations, and we track these gaps in needs. These needs have surfaced in the past year. Childcare challenges, as I know you guys are aware of, programming focused on child and youth development, mental health and well-being programming, as well as providing safe spaces and opportunities for children and youth to connect with one another. We have developed and facilitated programs in the past that have supported these gaps and needs during COVID-19. So previously, I've presented on our COVID relief program that we offered in 2020 and 2021. This program was part of the COVID relief program offered through the Community Social Development Department. Our main program we offered was free play, free time for 3 to 5-year-olds and play without parents for 6 to 12-year-olds. In 2020, we had 389 children and youth access this program. So the overall goals of these programs was to support families by decreasing stress during the pandemic, have short-term childcare solutions for families, children maintaining those social connections in a safe environment, and supporting children and youth development. We have also looked towards other communities for similar programs. So the community research that was completed on 3 different programs. So we looked at the Green Shack program, which is a free outdoor-based program in Edmonton, where program leaders host a variety of games, challenges, and activities to get kids active. The Park and Play program is a free outdoor program which includes crafts, games, and activities, and this program is offered in Calgary. The Summer Soupy program is offered in Hamilton, Ontario, and again, another program offered partly as a drop-in program and some as set program times. Each of these research programs are child development-based programs, focusing on providing that safe space for children to enjoy and learn activities, get children out of the house for a couple hours, give parents a break for a few hours, and children becoming familiar with different playgrounds in their neighborhood. The key commonality is none of these programs are registered childcare programs. They focus on child and youth development and creating a community connections. So this brings me to the summer pilot program, the Adventure Club program for children ages 6 to 9 and children ages 10 to 13. So combining the research and information gathered from various community partners, participants, and community agencies, and tracking community trends, the Adventure Club program was developed to utilize this surplus funding. It is an outdoor-based program located at various parks around town, with the option of using the family connection space if we have a wet summer or if we have air quality advisories in our local area. The Adventure Club program is set up as a pilot program, so there'll be no long-term operational impact. Some additional program details for the Adventure Club for children ages 6 to 9. It's a 7-week program offered this summer for 2 days a week, 2 hours per day. The focus is on that social emotional development, building relationships, developing problem-solving skills, and giving parents that break, as well as mental health for parents and children. The 10 to 13-year-old program is a youth development program, again, supporting that mental health and emotional development, really connecting peers through activities, community development work. Both of these programs are not registered licensed childcare programs. The outcomes that we will be looking at evaluating through this program is that play-based activities are designed to promote social emotional development and well-being. They will provide families with affordable childcare options, and that children and youth and families feel supported and connected to their community. To measure these outcomes, we'll be tracking indicators and reporting back the program successes when the pilot is complete. So the next steps of this is I will be returning to council in the fall to give an update on the program based on our evaluation and the indicators. We do not expect that there will be any surplus money going forward from the provincial grant, so the evaluation will inform the Family Connection Centre 2023 budget, including potential grants that we will seek, as well as municipal and provincial budgets. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all your efforts in this regard. I just have one clarifying question. When you mentioned that each of the programs run for 7 weeks, one for 2 days a week, one for 1 day a week, it's 4 hours per day?
4 hours today, 4 hours per day for the 6 to 9-year-olds, and then the 10 to 13-year-olds will be for 2 hours for 1 day.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great. So it's not all day?
It's not all day.
Okay.
No, this is just a pilot project, and we're hoping to gather some information and see if it can expand or change depending on what the need is.
Great. Look to councillors to see if there's any questions. Seeing none. Oh, somebody, oh, you're right there. Councillor McCallum.
I don't have any questions. I just want to say that I think this is a really great program, and I've been advocating with FCSS for a while to look at something a little bit different. This is different than what we normally offer with childcare. The lack of registration is something, but I think that, I know in particular the SUPE program out of Hamilton has been running for over 100 years in that way, and all the neighborhood parks, kids can go down to that playground and know that there's somebody there for them to hang out with, and a group of kids from their neighborhood from 9 in the morning until lunch, and then after lunch until 3:30. And for a lot of neighborhoods where there's new Canadians and families are off working all day, their kids are home all day. So this is really, I think, an amazing opportunity, and I'm looking forward to see what the data looks like in the fall. And I'm happy that FCSS has decided to run with it. It's a bit like it's not something that's the norm. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Councillor Maw.
Thank you for bringing this program forward. You know, as the school year starts to end, there's the panic moment with parents like, summer programming, what are you going to do? It's booked. I don't know what to do. And so it's really timely and awesome that this is coming out. You mentioned indicators of success. What are some of those indicators of success that you guys are using when we look back at this in the fall?
We'll be looking at tracking to see if, you know, as I mentioned with the outcomes there, we'll be looking at making sure those outcomes are met through some of those indicators. So ensuring that there is that social emotional piece to it, and that the children are gaining those skills, as well as just children, youth, and families feeling supported. So are they getting what they need out of the program? Are they utilizing it for the needs that we're hoping that they're going to use it for, and just that break for the families.
Great, thank you so much.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm very supportive of this. I think it's a fantastic idea. I'm just curious, what other ideas were tossed around for this money, and where else could it have gone?
Where else could it have gone? So yeah, that's a interesting question. Really, I mean, I kind of walked you through how we sort of arrived at the decision, and just really looking at what the community needs were based on the funding that we did have. So there's obviously a lot more that we can do depending on the funding that we do have for this type of program. But yeah, so at this point, this is how we arrived at the decision, based on just doing that community research and making sure we're understanding what the community needs.
Ms. Brown.
So sorry to jump in. One of the key things was that we wanted to make sure that there was no ongoing operational impact, because it's a surplus dollars. So we looked at new programs that were in a certain cost budget, a cost pocket, instead of anything like adding to our existing programs, which would have a long-lasting operational impact. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you to both of you. And I see no further questions, so Ms. DeMontany, thank you for your time today. Good luck with this program. We look forward to hearing how it goes, and really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
We'll now move to item D2, Circular Cities and Regions Initiative. Mr. Robbins and Ms. Fournier, welcome to Committee of the Whole.
Well, good morning, Mayor Krautzert and Council. Yeah, Ms. Fournier and myself will be here speaking to you today about the Circular Cities and Regions Initiative. So just a little overview of our presentation. We'll first let you know what circular economy is. We'll take a look at the definition. We'll take a look at what the initiative was over the last year, some examples, our opportunities report that we worked on through the workshops, and then some possible next steps. So to start, what is the circular economy? Well, the simple of it is we want to keep products and materials in use as long as possible by designing out waste and pollution. So you look at a linear economy, we make products, we buy products, we throw them out. We're kind of operating more in a recycling economy right now, where we make products, buy products, they stay around for a bit, but there's still a fair amount of landfill waste. And the idea of the circular economy is that products are made and used for as long as possible, minimizing that landfill waste. And the circular economy is a philosophy, and this philosophy can be applied to all projects, procurements, and practices. And this diagram kind of highlights ways a circular idea can be applied. So when we're purchasing things, are we using renewable energies or recoverable resources? Do we actually need to purchase actual products and actually own them, or can we purchase things as a service? Do we actually need new things? Can we repair them, extend the life of them, remanufacture or resell them? Are we utilizing the materials as best we can? So could we share them and actually have more people using them? And then when it is finally the end of life of a product, are we doing our best to keep those items out of the landfill? So it's a simple idea. It's not new. It's been around for a long time. We used to use it, but it can be sort of summarized in sort of these three words: share, reuse, and repair, sort of the simplicity of it. So the Circular Cities and Regions Initiative was an initiative with the idea to advance circular economy in Canada. So the town of Canmore was invited to participate. It was a one-year pilot, and through that 1 year, we took part in webinars and workshops to increase our knowledge on it. And there are 50 municipalities across Canada taking part, so it was great to have different perspectives from coast to coast at these workshops. And the expertise were provided by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Recycling Council of Alberta, Recyc Quebec, and the National Zero Waste Council. And so we had a series of webinars, and then the final exercise, we brought together a bunch of departments from the town and went through and sort of built an opportunities report. And Ms. Fournier will look at that a little later with us. Through the process in the webinars, it was highlighted that there's already a number of things happening in Canmore that are circular. So examples we have is our residential and commercial food waste collection program. We have a public library, not only lend books, but things like trekking poles for people to use. We have thriving thrift stores and consignment stores in Canmore. We have other food recovery opportunities, so things like the food recovery barn. We have a grocery store that's using the loop, which connects farmers to grocery stores, and so their food waste is used to feed livestock. We have a great food bank. There's ample gear rental opportunities for tourists and residents alike, so you don't actually buy all the outdoor gear that we want to go outside and play with. And there's great online gear swaps and used sales that are heavily used within the community. And then also WildSmart does have a gardening tool lending library. So there's lots of things we're already doing that are circular, which is great. And we did learn about many different examples, but a couple that I wanted to share from around the world was one, the library in Mississauga. Kind of hard to see the picture, but they totally gutted the library. As you can see in the lower one, they took out everything. They needed to redo the library, and they took a very detailed approach to the fixtures and furniture. So they actually inventoried all their fixtures and furniture, and they weighed it all, every item, and then they looked very critically at how they could repurpose it in the new library. So here they were able to, some fancy features they were able to reutilize. Things that they couldn't reuse in the new library that they either sold or donated, and then the other pieces that they weren't able to use or donate, they recycled. And then things of mixed material were actually disassembled so they could actually be properly recycled. And so in the end, they figured that they kept 200-ish thousand kilograms of waste out of the landfill by taking this approach. Another really interesting one was from Finland. So they had an aging, sort of underutilized municipal fleet. It did need replacing. And so instead of just going out and buying new vehicles, they actually started an electric vehicle car share program. So that car share was used for municipal staff, but then was also available for residents and tourists to use as well. So they could maximize the utilization of those vehicles. So why do we participate? Well, it's not just about the environment, there's also lots of social and economic aspects to it and benefits for the community. It's participatory, meaning it can and should be community-led, and it's tangible and manageable at the individual and community level. We wanted to learn new approaches for this revived circular philosophy. And the circular philosophy benefits many, and it doesn't just need to come at a cost. And it does apply to everything that we do. And it's not just a technology that you plug in and then you save the world with, but it's just an idea. We wanted to learn about emerging best practices for circular economy, and we saw that it had an opportunity to support municipal plans that need updating, so putting that circular economy lens on things. And this quote kind of sums up some of the strengths and benefits of thinking circular. So sharing, reuse, and repair have tremendous potential to create inclusive jobs for all skill and income levels and support more affordable daily living. And with that, I'll pass it on to Ms. Fournier, who will take us through our opportunities report.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins, and good morning, Mayor Councillor and members of council. One of the main outcomes of the CCRI was the opportunities report. So this was provided and in part was general. So ideas of the benefits for municipalities to transition to a more circular economy, municipal levers that we could use, emerging best practices, and then the other part was really tailored to us and developed through 2 workshops where staff from multiple departments provided input. They identified opportunities and barriers in our community, the numerous examples that Mr. Robbins just spoke of, and areas of priority interest for staff. And this report is provided as an attachment to the briefing for your reference. So these are the levers for municipal governments to use to advance a more circular economy. I won't go into detail about all of them, but for me it was helpful to have these mapped out in this way and to understand that there are numerous and very different opportunities and kind of tactics that we could take in this work. It ranges from engaging with and partnering with community to seed ideas about sharing, reuse, and repair, or really focusing on our own assets and figuring out how we could potentially maintain those in a different way to extend the life as long as possible. Through the workshops, the big focus was identifying kind of key priority areas and of interest for staff. So the first 2, the sharing and reuse economy and regenerative visitor economy, were chosen and included in the opportunities report. The built environment was also an area of priority for staff. So while it wasn't included in the opportunities report, because it was really an effort to narrow it down to 2, it is being included for today's discussion because it was also kind of a key one for staff. And these areas were chosen because of the social and economic benefits, because the opportunity for community leadership and partnership with a lot of these, and because of the potential to reduce waste and carbon emissions. The sharing and reuse economy was the first one identified, and the big one with this is just the link to affordability. The sharing and reuse economy, represents creative business models and jobs. As Mr. Robbins mentioned, we do have a thriving thrift and consignment sector here in Canmore, as well as rental. It represents a great opportunity in Canmore, and staff are excited because we are a space-constrained community. The sharing economy can allow people to live in smaller spaces and own less stuff. So it means that we can have access to things that we might not be able to afford to own or just not want or need to own. You know, perhaps all of us love to have waffles every 2 months, but does that mean that we all need to go out and buy a clunky waffle iron that we have to find space for in our kitchens with all of the other seldomly used appliances? You know, the sharing economy really means that we can have access to these types of things when we need them and then give them back, so they're centralized. It's also very tangible and scalable, so that any resident or business could take part in whatever way works for them. So this can be a group of neighbors that are sharing vacuums or carpet cleaners. It can be friends or colleagues sharing gear, or an institution like the library having a town-wide clothing swap like they did this Saturday. The regenerative visitor economy was the second priority area of interest identified by staff, and really because of the clear link to the Canmore-Kananaskis Community Strategic Plan and the recently adopted Regenerative Tourism Framework. It is also the largest industry in Canmore, and opportunities to reduce impacts through the circular economy. Tourism Canmore-Kananaskis is proceeding with a baseline assessment of sustainability practices in the local industry, and this may identify some opportunities for advancing circular economy in this sector. Lastly, the built environment. Construction, renovation, and demolition waste, is one of the largest sources of landfill waste, besides food waste. Those are the top two. It's also, buildings are the highest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Canmore. So this is why it was important to staff to also not forget about this area. There's also finite space of our landfill. And landfills are exceedingly difficult to site. So being mindful and efficient with space as we're going forward is important. With the rising cost of raw construction materials, as we saw with lumber in the last year, the business case for taking the time and effort to sort and reuse building materials becomes more attractive. This is also an area for kind of creative business models and potential job growth. So next steps. We are not recommending that the opportunities report be adopted as an official strategy. It is a really good start, but it would need more work to become an action plan. And instead, we're recommending that staff resources be spent looking at how circular economy can be integrated into strategies that will need updating in the future, or how we can prioritize actions within existing strategies that are related. There's also work that has been done and being done with circular economy that doesn't need to wait for a formal action plan. So for example, this year in the 2022 Community Grants Program, circular economy was included as a criteria for the grant applicants. And some of the selected recipients are advancing circular economy through promotion of product sharing, some fun competitions to kind of focus on and advance circular economy, and product reuse and repurposing. So this is already happening. Another example, recent examples from the fire station construction, the fill that was taken out for the foundation works was reused on site as much as possible to prevent that from having to be hauled away. And it was also reused by the Parks Department as well. And our facilities team has kind of a long-standing practice of reusing furniture and equipment wherever possible. There's also some work with the Biosphere Institute. They have a little bit of funding to do some community convening around accelerating climate action in the Bow Valley, and they're trying to get more funding to expand that reach. And if that happens, we can potentially integrate circular economy and ideas of sharing, reuse, and repair, and the connection to climate action through those conversations with community. They are also working on potentially hosting a circular map. The town of Banff had put together a public-facing map of circular businesses and services in the Bow Valley, and the Biosphere is looking at potentially hosting that on their website so public can access. And of course, we'll have continued conversations with Tourism Canmore-Kananaskis. So this is our last slide. Just wanted to leave with a little bit of inspiration. This is a mall in Sweden, but it's not just any mall. In this mall, everything in it is repurposed, reused, or upcycled in some way. And with that, we'll invite any questions you may have for the two of us.
Excellent. Thanks to you both for this presentation. It's obviously a topic of great interest, and I guess the questions that will be answered over time is how we get from here to there, and that's really how do we get these things going. So I did have questions around, like sharing libraries of appliances or tools or whatever. How do they typically get started? Is this like usually a little private initiative? Is it some not-for-profit does it? Does the municipality get involved? Like, how are they typically structured?
I think what we saw in the CCRI, and in my experience in Vancouver, was all of those things. It can be a combination. So many times it's a nonprofit that gets together and creates like a tool library. Right. In the case of Banff, it's actually their public library that are hosting the library of things. So they're adding more items that can be shared amongst community. So in that case, it's municipality. Sometimes it's municipal grant programs. Or convening ideas, getting people together, almost like matchmaking. They play kind of a role, and then kind of will fund an initiative for a few years to get something like that started.
So if there are any community organizations, groups, or even individuals that might want to explore this, are you aware of any toolkits or anything that might be available that can sort of do the how-to or the best practices of?
Yeah, the one, not locally per se. I know that, the one quote that Mr. Revin shared with you, it was from the Share Use Repair folks. Like they're really trying to advance that and be an organization that focuses on that. So they would provide some, we don't have anything kind of published, and I haven't seen anything in Canmore, and it's really kind of initiative specific.
Yeah, because that might be a real low resource if we're able to happen to come across information and have toolkits available on our website or something like that, so that because in a neighborhood, maybe somebody in my neighborhood, they have a real passion for this. Maybe they want to turn their garage into the library for the neighborhood, and those of us who mow our lawn once every week or two. We all don't need to have a lawnmower. We could go borrow the lawn. Yeah, that sort of thing. Okay, well, that's great. Councillor McCallum, you have a question.
Thank you. I wanted to make a comment on the construction waste piece because I've noticed a real change over that in the last 10 years, and that's since the rules have changed around what you're charged and separating your waste and everything else, which was great of BOTA, I believe, that brought that forward. But just in general, there's a lot less excess. People have gotten, developers have gotten a lot smarter in terms of what they're ordering, so there's a lot less excess stuff around town, which is good. It means that people are understanding their product better. But my next question was about the repair piece. So appliance repair people are like unicorns now. And I'm wondering if you have seen any uptake in terms of education within the trades for these kinds of positions. We had a gentleman in our community that was Russ Shannon that was here for 100 million years, it seemed. And literally the 3 days after his wife passed away, and I didn't know she'd passed away, he was in my kitchen fixing and he didn't need to work, it was just what he loved to do. So I believe there's one other person in town that's been taking over that, but is completely overworked, and with all mostly large appliances. How do we encourage or bring in the expertise for people to be able to consider that as a business or consider that as a trade? And do those trades exist at all still?
Yeah, that is a very good question.
I see a bit of it on TikTok, I have to say. There's
nice.
Actually a lady that likes to talk about how to do different things with your appliances to fix them, and that's what she does, but she's in the States, so.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good question. I can't answer it off the top because I don't know, locally where that is at, and if there are, organizations focusing specifically on enabling that or making sure that that
It's a
training is still
barrier in
happening.
terms
It is a
of the
barrier,
repair.
absolutely.
Like, we can repair bikes and things like that without much issue in large appliances to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
But with small appliances, you're going to have to take it into the city, which then there's a whole other GHG impact of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know some communities have hosted repair workshops. Seems to be kind of the more popular initiative. So instead of having somebody who has to have a storefront and pay that kind of overhead fee and staff, that every once in a while at one of the community centers, there's a big repair workshop and everybody just brings their stuff in, and there'll be a few experts kind of there almost to lend a hand, not just to do all the work, but sit beside you. So that seems to be kind of the more community-based model.
Yeah.
But, I wish I could answer the question more
And that makes
fully
sense in a city like Vancouver, where you've got how many millions of people, but how do we, small town size that? And I guess that's my questions as we move forward through this, how we bring in that expertise or provide a business opportunity as a community. I hope that becomes a business opportunity at some point, because it's certainly not only popular, but we need to do this. We need to stop.
Absolutely. There's also some higher level things happening too. It's with what's called right to repair legislation and a movement, because there's a lot of planned obsolescence that gets built into materials and products. And the reason why a lot of these businesses are not sustainable is because it's cheaper to just go buy a new one rather than pay the money to repair them. Or there's a perception that that's the case. And in this right to repair legislation is trying to, or people who are pushing for that type of legislation are trying to make sure that things are built that should be repaired and can be repaired, and there's no proprietary things that are stopping a repair person from being able to do that.
Thanks. Just my question.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was just thinking a lot about the right to repair and those ideas. I had Jamie Strickland come in to repair some appliances, and finally I'd spent so much money repairing appliances that it was just time to buy new appliances, and it kind of made me sad to watch that old washer and dryer move out the door. My family growing up had an equipment rental business, and we still, everything from forks and knives to bobcats, and these days it's actually a lot more than that. So we watched all that sort of circular stuff work, and those business models are fantastic and very effective. I had a few questions. Excuse me. Car sharing in smaller communities, is that idea getting to be a thing at all, or are we still looking at larger metropolises for that sort of functionality? Is that still a...
It's happening in some communities. For example, Invermere. It's nonprofit based, and it's an electric vehicle actually, but it's one car, and it's membership based. So I think, it's through Wildsight. Yeah. Well, there is a Kootenai Co-op, and there's the Kootenai Co-op as well, and then kind of Invermere's sort of, part of it, as I understand. So to answer your question, I think what my understanding, and this isn't this is an area that we need to do more research on, but it's my understanding that the for-profit models of car sharing, like the car to go, are more, you need to have a certain population density for that to work. And so those tend to be more effective in the bigger cities, and that's been the barrier for smaller towns. Where it has worked is the nonprofit approach. Or, as Mr. Robbins mentioned, sometimes municipalities have been involved. That same model of using municipal vehicles and allowing community access evenings and weekends, it's also been, there's a bunch of small towns in Quebec that are using that.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, and there's other examples that are more development or neighborhood specific. So there's some that we've learned about from on the East Coast, and it's a like housing cooperative, so it's kind of a larger one, but they all share a car. So it's not a whole community-based one, but just a certain group of people who are all living in the same area, so they have that access.
Thank you. If I may, just a couple more. Are you aware of any apps that people are using locally to share? I know there's a bunch of them, but is there one that is predominant in town that people are using effectively?
For just materials?
Yeah, for lawnmowers and I don't know, whatever.
Do you know of any, I mean, I think mostly it's more less sharing than selling, the Facebook Marketplace.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
the different groups on there seem to be the most popular for selling, not so much sharing that I've seen.
Yeah.
But they do exist.
Yeah, I know they do.
Yeah.
I was curious if there was a predominant one that people were.
Yeah, I haven't, not that I've seen yet. But again, this is just our kind of foray into this, so I'm sure, hopefully by even talking about this, someone will send me an email later and say,
I'm sure
this
somebody
is
will.
the one.
I'm hoping so. And then back to that kind of that right to repair idea, and this is just a statement and an idea that I've often thought that the way we do accounting actually and depreciation, how we depreciate so quickly sometimes, and we're forced to think that things only last 5 years or 20 years. And I think if we changed depreciation models around accounting, we would actually encourage a better circular economy, things to last longer, the right to repair, those sorts of ideas. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ma.
Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Robbins and Ms. Fournier. I was at the landfill yesterday, last week for a tour, and I was struck by the sheer amount of concrete. Tell me about concrete. How can we move the needle forward on that stuff? Because that stuff is just piles and piles and piles of it. Yeah.
Yep.
I was just curious, like moving forward, like what sort of stuff we can do with that.
No, the
concrete guy.
The garbage guy. The Francis Cook Resource Recovery Center and landfill, they do a great job of marketing on all those materials. So those giant piles you see are just stockpiles. And eventually, they have, at times, have giant stockpiles, but they do find buyers for it all. And so the concrete often gets ground down and used as fill in projects. So instead of trucking in gravel as fill, if they can get the right spec for the engineers from concrete, then it can be used for that. That's one concrete thing. So all those giant piles do have a market in a sense, but sometimes it takes time to find the right market for them to be built for. Yeah, and they do work hard there. They don't landfill it. They hang on to it until they can find a market for it out there. So yeah, the piles do look big. Yeah. And it's actually interesting when you look at an overview of the landfill, the resource recovery side of it actually is larger than the landfill side of it in a footprint, which is great.
And this is maybe a technical question. Is there a substitute coming down the radar that you guys seen in the decades moving forward where maybe concrete will be less of the preferred material of choice?
Yeah, not that I know of.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's getting better is all I'm trying to say.
Thank you, because I know it's pretty intensive when it comes to the GHG side. It's like a heavy offender. Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Robbins, Ms. Fournier, for your time today and for updating us on this work. And as I understand it, although it's not being sought to accept it for planning purposes, it is being used as a lens for all other sorts of plans that we're looking at, right? So it's going to have the ability to continue to influence decisions and maybe communications and examples and et cetera into the community. So thank you very much. Yeah. We'll move to item D3, Bow Valley Trail and Teepee Town Transportation Planning. Mr. Asarte, welcome to Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mayor and Council. Over the past several years, engineering, led by our transportation engineer, Claire Ellick, and our project engineer, Trevor Reeder, have been working with ISL, local consultant, Mobicon, consultant we've worked with on integrated transportation planning, and Dick Van Veen, a sub-consultant to Mobicon, to develop transportation concepts and stormwater plans for the Bow Valley Trail and Teepee Town areas. So the studies I'll speak to today are already informing capital work. They've been used for the project we did last year on Mountain Ave, road rehabilitation there, and also informing private development in the area, how that development interfaces with the street faces. It'll be the basis for capital planning and development and redevelopment in this important community this next decade and presumably well beyond that. So the study area I'll talk about includes the streets of Teepee Town, Mountain Avenue along the highway, First Avenue central to Teepee Town, 2nd Avenue along Bow Valley Trail. It's bounded to the north by 17th Street and Hospital Place to the south. The project includes looking at Bow Valley Trail from the intersection up at 17th all the way down to where the work was completed as part of TIP 20 at the Bow Valley Trail Railway intersection. Finally, the study area includes pedestrian crossing of the Trans-Canada Highway. Study work's been informed by 2 key precedent documents previously approved by Council, the ARPs for Teepee Town and for Bow Valley Trail, as well as the Integrated Transportation Plan accepted by Council for planning purposes in 2018, and street cross sections and other elements of the ENG guidelines. A number of studies, memos, briefs have been completed as part of a larger capital project for the area. I'm going to touch on each of these to some degree in the presentation. We're subsequently going to post them to the website for information. I'll also touch on utility master planning updates that are underway and stormwater planning that's going to inform capital work in the area in the coming years. The ARP for Bow Valley Trail, it covers the full length. It's envisioned to be an area that has separate facilities for walking and bicycling, protected from traffic for safety. It's intended to be an inviting gateway into the community, a vibrant area with attractions. It's serving as a destination and also as a primary area for visitor accommodation. From a transportation perspective, this is an excellent area to provide walking, cycling, and transit facilities. It's a destination, but also an intercept parking area for our overnight guests. It's home to one of our more walkable neighborhoods with Teepee Town. And at present, there's really no accommodation on much of the east side of the central portion of Bow Valley Trail for people walking and cycling. And so this is a good opportunity for us to promote mode shift. The Teepee Town ARP, it has a vision for a neighborhood with a variety of housing options and commercial services, a distinct character. Throughout the document, there's an emphasis on making the streets nicer. They're currently fairly undeveloped, heavily parked, and not particularly attractive. So making them nicer places to walk and for people to be. 2nd Ave is a mixed-use commercial area, and in recent years we've seen some really great developments there, and there are actually 3 or 4 now that are in the works. Teepee Town, it has wider right-of-ways, but little green space for public use and gathering. There's a heavy reliance on adjacent areas like the hospital to provide open space. It has a small playground in the community garden, and there's a vision that that area will continue to serve as an important role in providing green space for Teepee Town, but also a desire to explore new green spaces within Teepee Town as part of road planning. For transportation and mobility, we see reference to the Integrated Transportation Plan and street designs of the guidelines, desire to manage parking and improve street appearance, making those safe and comfortable places for people to walk and cycle, and a desire to transition from Bow Valley Trail being a real barrier, a real a quite a harsh environment and a barrier to mobility to being part of what connects Teepee Town to the rest of the community. Traffic calming's envisioned to be utilized throughout the community, and that's to reduce speeds, discourage shortcutting, and enhance pedestrian movements. The plan includes some examples of street designs with curb extensions, chicanes, which are curves in the road, sidewalks, parking, green spaces, and this is really just to help inform the future design process. From the integrated transportation plan, we have street classification. So Bow Valley Trail is an arterial. It has a 50-kilometer-an-hour design speed. It's intended to have medians to facilitate crossing and turn movements. Second Ave is classified as an activity street. There are only a couple in town, Main Street being the other. So a slower speed limit, really pedestrian-oriented to the commercial development along it, intended to be a walking space, primarily where vehicles are present, but as guests. Local roads within Teepee Town are intended to be serviced with sidewalks and otherwise shared space for any wheeled travel. On the right is the integrated transportation plan's concept planning for pedestrian facilities. And so that envisions Teepee Town to be bounded on all sides by mixed-use pathway, and that pathway connecting to a future crossing of the Trans-Canada Highway over to Palliser. There are pretty significant water and sewer upgrades, and those are intended to add capacity for continued growth and also to address some life cycle maintenance for aging lines. Dashed lines are shown here. Green dashed is a sewer main replacement, and the white dash is a water main replacement, and those both tie into downstream improvements that were completed in 2020 as part of the TIP 20 project, shown in solid lines going through the main intersection. Utility improvements along Bow Valley Trail are included in the off-site levy model. To advance the design of the streets in Teepee Town, we've updated planning for stormwater management, and that's to address well-known ponding issues that affect the area, as well as affecting downstream along Bow Valley Trail. The flow of water in Teepee Town, flow of rainwater and groundwater is generally from the north to the south and west, or sorry, to the southeast. There are 4 sources of this water. It can come in from overland flow from the Trans-Canada Highway. It can come as rainfall on the community itself. It can travel through the groundwater and through the soils beneath Teepee Town from adjacent areas. And it's pumped out of the groundwater into the surface by a number of properties in the community that are built to legacy standards before elevations were set above the groundwater levels. These water sources, they get managed to varying degrees in a few ways. First, we want to avoid it, so getting those elevations built higher for new development. And then either through infiltration into landscaping or other permeable areas, or through infiltration through storm infrastructure like dry wells, which are shown as green dots in this plan drawing. Dry wells are just perforated manholes with river rock around them that allows for infiltration into the ground. There's no pipe system available to tie this stormwater into in the valley bottom. By the time you get down to Bow Valley Trail, we are at river gravels and silts, and the water table is quite high there, so there's no place to pipe via gravity, and there's no natural outlet to the Bow River. So the way to manage all of the waters is simply through infiltration. At present, because of all the constraints we have, when we have a high rainfall event like 2013 or even the more recent one, we'll see ponding throughout Teepee Town, and that collects towards the downstream end, towards the hospital. These areas can be fully inundated in higher rainfall and groundwater events. So the stormwater management plan currently under development is looking to address the water sources and their impacts in a number of ways. So firstly, cutting off the flow from the Trans-Canada, having that all pond up at the top end of Teepee Town and infiltrate into the neighborhood wasn't helping. So as part of last year's work, we raised grades of the road and reestablished the ditch line, which carries flow around Teepee Town and into an infiltration facility at the downstream end. Next, with each street design, the intent is to create facilities throughout the community. So use every little opportunity we have to create an area for infiltration, green space. We can use what's called LID, low impact development, essentially pre-treatment areas of green space that take out sediments and contaminants before putting the water into dry wells. The facilities you can build in the street won't likely be sufficient because of parking requirements and driveways. Won't be sufficient to manage all of the drainage. So the idea is towards the south end creating these overflow facilities where any flow that's too much for the street ultimately gets carried down to additional infiltration facilities down at the south end. And from there, you continue down to the low point of Teepee Town, where the plans dating back to 2004 always envisions down along Bow Valley Trail needing some kind of larger stormwater management facility. So the intent is to try to keep as much water possible perched up on Teepee Town itself, really slow that inflow into the groundwater, and that's going to help us not just through Teepee Town, but also Bow Valley Trail. We don't want to pump all that water down to Bow Valley Trail and then have our issue just move downstream. So a large facility could look something like this. This was constructed as part of the TIP 20 project. It's an area where we had no space to create any storm ponding and had all the same challenges. And so this essentially provides both large-scale storage, but also a really good facility for promoting infiltration into the surrounding soils. Or alternatively, we can look at something like this, creation of a large green space towards the southeast end of Teepee Town. And this can act as a dry pond, so it can be usable green space except for in larger events, in which case it would inundate. And so that's a very typical way of managing storm events while providing green space. So in this concept, Second Ave would be cul-de-sac. It would still allow for pedestrian and cycle access and emergency access, but use up all of that large road space towards the end of the road where there is no vehicular access to the development, and we've worked with the developer to look at this concept. And so we could put in quite a substantial storm pond. And this pond could also potentially fit with other needs of the activity street and Teepee Town for providing some green space. Okay, moving to a concept that was developed for initially to inform the Mountain Ave design for the grant-funded capital work we had last year. So we needed something to build off of, and so we worked with Mobicon to produce a plan for this area. The objective was also to inform, we're seeing developments come in and we didn't really know how to interface those developments with the street, what grades to put driveways at, how to interface the sidewalk, and so this planning also informs that. So this plan envisions a transition away from continuous and informal parking to a cross-section with formalized parking area, green spaces, neighborhood level street lighting, and a network of sidewalks. Green spaces used both to improve appearance, but also to aid in that stormwater management. Parking can either be parallel or perpendicular, but the intent is to formalize it and per the area redevelopment plan, really promote parking to be provided via the laneways. All of the developments have parking available to them by the lanes, and the intent is to move the community in that direction over time. The plan includes the continuous pathway all around the sides of Teepee Town. I'll just flip to this one. It's actually a better illustration. So that pathway is bounding on all sides. It's connecting to Bow Valley Trail. It connects the community garden and the playground, as well as up to the north, the pedestrian crossing of the Trans-Canada Highway. On Mountain Ave, we have 10 meters of right-of-way, and the roadway takes up 6. So if you put a sidewalk in the road, you actually don't have any space left, really. And so we worked with Alberta Transportation to get permission to have the pathway portion of this concept on Alberta Transportation land. Also, there are some green space areas to the southeast of Teepee Town that are worth preserving down in here. And so we've worked with the hospital on a agreement that allows us to bring the pathway through and connecting up to the community garden and the playground. So the alignment can actually move off of the road and leave some of that green space for storm infiltration. Within the neighborhood, roads are shared spaces, sidewalks provided on all streets. We've got 20-meter right-of-ways. What's shown is basic local roads with intersections that are traffic calm. So these are raised intersections. I'll show an image in a moment of that. But we've got 20-meter right-of-ways. So that gives opportunities to look at a variety of treatments that can be used within the community, and those will be decided as we get into detailed design. So right now it's just high-level conceptual. We know from all the planning the elements that we'd like to see in Teepee Town. When we go to do the design for a particular street, we appreciate that we're going to have to knock on doors. We're going to have to talk to individual owners. They're going to have driveway requirements. We're going to have to get grades to match. We've done it on Mountain, so we have a good understanding of what that looks like. There's a lot of interface and nuance. So for us to try to do a concept for the community without first going and really talking to people wouldn't be a successful process. The next study area focused on Bow Valley Trail between 17th and the Tip 20 intersection. It considered active transport facilities, crossings, and intersection design. It should be noted that traffic assessment's been done for Teepee Town and Bow Valley Trail, and it's not anticipated that we need to do any major changes to the roadway or intersections along Bow Valley Trail, along the stretch. I'll touch on 17th in a moment, but for the stretch itself, apart from putting in an occasional median for crossing and turn bay here and there, it will continue to function as a 2-lane roadway and well into the future. So for this area, at the south end, we considered 2 options. So the top cross section is the existing. We've got a multi-use path on the west side, open green area on the east side, integrated bike lanes on the road. And the first option is looking at a multi-use path on the east side. The second option looks at separate and protected facilities on the east side, also on the west side. So we've built the multi-use path on the west side with space to allow future separation through a sidewalk. It's really challenging on the west side because we have a big drop-off to existing properties. So for now, we've perched we've moved the pathway up, but there's a slope going down. So ideally, through redevelopment, you'll see grades on the properties come up like we've done at base camp. And in the future, that sidewalk just gets easier and easier to eventually retrofit. On the east side, we don't have quite the same constraints. Towards the north end, 3 options were looked at. One where mixed-use path is placed on the east side of the roadway. The second option looks at, again, separate facilities, a dedicated pathway along Bow Valley Trail, and within on 2nd Ave, a nice wide sidewalk that would serve that activity street and commercial frontage. The third option looks at incorporating the cycle route onto Second Ave itself, so that's a shared space concept, along with the sidewalk. What we're proposing is to go straight to separate facilities. Second Ave is an activity street. Having a sidewalk there makes sense. Other areas of Bow Valley Trail, commercial frontages, it makes sense to have a sidewalk. By providing an efficient cycle facility for the full length of Central Bow Valley Trail, it will allow us to remove those shoulders on Bow Valley Trail and use that space for stormwater management and for transit facilities. And so we won't need that redundant space. Providing a dedicated facility on the east side where there's less conflicts, it'll take pressure off the west side. Pretty much as soon as we built it, the west side saw pretty significant use. You see large groups of visitors walking along there. It's actually not, it's a challenging place to cycle if you're trying to go somewhere efficiently. So if we can provide a dedicated facility, it'll allow that to continue to operate as a mixed-use path for longer. Looking at crossing treatments, we're proposing, as an arterial continuous median would be ideal, but we have so many accesses along that stretch of road that by the time you cut the access and the turn movement room, you don't have a median left. So instead we'll do, like we've done towards the south end, discrete sections of median with turn bays, or just pinch the road and narrow those crossings. And we're looking at consolidating crossings along the roadway. Okay, north end, Bow Valley Trail 17th. This intersection was actually looked at as part of the Railway Avenue concept. We took another look at it in light of the work happening in Teepee Town and also tying into the Ped Bridge. And also the parcels on the northeast side have been consolidated by a single owner, and they're looking at options for redevelopment there. And so working with them, we considered a few options. As with many of our intersections, this is another challenging one. We have the tracks right beside it. We have this odd geometry with an offset 17th Street. In an ideal world, it'd be great to clean that up, but we can't always operate in an ideal world, so we've looked at an offset intersection option. All of them provide much improved and much safer pedestrian and cycle facilities, and all of them are safe and functional for vehicle travel. We looked at what would it look like to consolidate those approaches. There's some land acquisition needed, shown in the magenta boundaries. We said, well, what if we tighten it up a little bit? Could we avoid acquiring land? And there's some potential there. It comes with compromised geometry on that east leg. We said, what about a roundabout? Could that work to consolidate the legs? It can. Again, you have similar impacts with land, and also you start to get question marks with roundabouts close to train tracks, because if traffic backs up from the tracks with an extended train, you can't prevent that traffic. It might not be easy to prevent that traffic from blocking all of Bow Valley Trail. Whereas with a signalized intersection, you might be able to keep traffic in turn bays and allow Bow Valley Trail to continue to flow. So that, not to say it's not possible, it's just when considering pros and cons and whether it's worth the effort. We looked at, can you move the intersection entirely and realign it? And you can, but certainly with pretty significant cost and constructability challenges. So ultimately, it looks as though maintaining the current offset intersection provides many of the advantages of any of the other options without a lot of the complexity and cost. There aren't significant enough advantages with the other options that would necessarily warrant shifting off of this idea. But again, when we get into detailed design with a future project, we can pull out the report, look at the pros and cons, and at that time, it's recommended more work is done with the train operations and thinking about confirming that this is the best route to go. Okay, last piece. Pedestrian crossing of the Trans-Canada Highway. So back in 2018, we were working on concepts for Palliser Trail and wanted to understand how connectivity could look when we were planning those pathways to Northview. We were also looking at the time at putting a pedestrian facility on Benchlands overpass, the lane that's been transitioned to a ped path. And so wanted to have some high-level planning in place to say, okay, what makes sense for a crossing location? With Mountain Ave being so tight to the Trans-Canada right-of-way, there's not a lot of landing area for G and H. J, you're landing in the middle of kind of interchange spaghetti. It gets hard to try to figure out the geometry on that one. F, you're landing by a high-pressure gas line house, that'll be tough. So, and also those might serve the current desire lines that we see for crossing the Trans-Canada reasonably well, but by the time you ramp up and over, like you're going a pretty long distance towards Benchlands already. And so is it really that big of an improvement other than psychologically over what exists there? So options that were further to the west and accommodate what's likely to be a larger demand from future development up on Stoneworks Creek makes sense while still accommodating existing desire lines from Palliser. And so a couple different options were looked at. So the blue lines are underpass options, the red are overpass. So approximately D and E were the alignments that were selected. As you go up the Stoneworks alluvial fan, the grades, A and B just become more challenging because you have to come up quite a bit more to get to the lands there. So D and E seem to make the most sense. They're still constrained. High pressure gas line, there's communication lines on the north side. You've got the highway, Palliser Trail, off ramps. Alberta Transportation plans to make this 8 lanes in the future, so these are all things we need to consider. 3+ turn lanes.
When?
Hopefully never.
Okay, just curious.
Hope.
Is that just Cork's advanced gates?
Let's continue.
All right, overpass option, just some conceptual drawings based on that design to give a sense of the lay of the land. It's quite a long structure having to get over all of those lanes. There's retaining structure needed on the abutments to be able to get up. You have to be up in the air probably 9 or so meters and get back down to grade. And so in that constrained space, it becomes a bit of a challenge. Underpass option looks a lot like the Cougar Creek underpass. It has slightly nicer grades tying in and out, and actually ends up being slightly less cost. And depending how we can negotiate with AT for their future widening of the road to come with bridge work at that time rather than building the full width now. Overpass you have to build for the future, so you end up with these really long structures, but underpass we might be able to widen in the future and avoid all the upfront cost, anticipating that widening comes well down the road. Okay, so in summary, we have functional and conceptual work complete for the area. It's based on the vision and requirements of our high-level guiding documents. The work is in support of a number of council priorities. There's flexibility in the options and for detailed design, but it does provide a really good basis for us to start to sort out details on individual projects and developments. And the concept work has coordinated with needed utility work and the stormwater management planning, and so projects you can start to envision puzzle pieces for the community falling in place for future projects. And that's really what we see as being next, is to do complete a big chunk of that utility work up into Teepee Town as part of detailed planning for 2023 and 2024 budget. Connect up that cycle path and sidewalk on the east side, get that portion of the community connected, and Through that, incorporate road rehabilitation and stormwater management on the southern portions of 2nd Avenue and Hospital Place. And there are placeholder budgets in the capital plan that envision this work coming along. And we'll revisit the overall budget this fall with council. Beyond that, capital planning for future phases of work can be considered as part of the budget as well. Where do we placeholder future phases? That's something that's been envisioned and desired in Teepee Town through the ARP process. There'll be ongoing engagement with directly impacted stakeholders and with the broader community for detailed designing and construction. For example, we're planning tonight to meet with 2nd Avenue residents to begin talking about what a potential near-term project could look like and understanding some of their concerns and constraints. And we'll continue to inform the broader community through council updates, website updates, social media, and through the budget process. So with that, update on our recent planning, and I'll take any questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Asarte. Very informative as usual. Just clarification when saying that what's next, detailed planning for 2023, 2024 capital budgets, is that the detailed planning that's starting now, or is the detailed planning will happen in those and then construction would be sometimes after that?
We'll firm up the exact timing through the budget process. It's somewhat dependent on funding, cost estimates that are being developed right now, and council priorities. The hope is to get the work done sooner than later. So construction in that time frame starting.
Okay, that would be great. And I just wanted to say I'm really happy to hear of the underpass option. And I'm glad to hear that it has potential options going forward that may be allowed to expand. Therefore, it's less expensive. So, because I really like the other underpass, and just from a the visual aspect of it and use aspect of it, I think that would be much more functional. So thank you for that. Councillor Graham, you have a question?
Well, Mrs. Faubert was ahead of me, but...
Not really.
No? Okay, excellent. Thank you for your presentation, as always, Mr. Asarte. I wondered, you know, a lot of people with the new intersection, a lot of people talked about a roundabout there, and when you presented a roundabout here, I wondered what the cost of going over top of the railway to actually make a roundabout functional there was.
To go over, like an overpass over the railway?
Yeah. I know it's significant. I'm just...
Yeah. So there's the cost for an interchange, I think is essentially what you're describing, an interchange of some form. They're in the $50 million plus range. Wouldn't be as significant as what they're doing in Cochrane right now, which is about $75 million, I think their project budget is. But they're quite expensive. Probably the bigger challenge with an overpass of the tracks is just the footprint that it creates. And you can envision you have to go up, for the rail clearance, it's 7 meters minimum. And then your bridge structure is going to be 2 meters at least above that. And so you're 30 feet in the air in the middle of the community, and you need to get all this traffic back down, and so the ramps become quite long. You end up impacting 4 prime properties and needing to do land acquisition, and then you've created a major barrier for how you move as a pedestrian or a cyclist. The real advantage is that you avoid the couple-minute train delay that happens 20 times a day, but there are a lot of downsides to that, and possibly constraints that make it really not practical or feasible, and certainly not economical. So the focus instead has been how do we balance traffic flows, get traffic flows where they need to be through mode shift, and put the emphasis on really great facilities for walking and cycling and encouraging transit use.
That's really not an option functionally, economically at all, is it? As much as I would love to see a roundabout there, it's just not really an option.
An overpass to roundabout, not really. I mean, a regular roundabout at grade could work still. It's still an option, and that would probably be in the order of $5 million versus a signalized intersection that might be 3.5 or something in that range, just in round numbers. So it's roundabouts are certainly feasible, and our policy is to consider them for all intersections if improvements are required. And so we will look at them for Railway Avenue and have Bow Valley Trail and other places.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. And then I too was excited about the underpass options, and I noticed a new fence along Teepee Town. I don't know when that went in. I just noticed it the other day. That was town infrastructure?
It was a replacement of an original fence. So when we did the Mountain Ave work, the old one came out and we put in a new one. Just it's the low fence you're referring to, along the west side of the highway. Yeah,
fairly small.
Yeah.
They hadn't noticed it before and just noticed it the other day. And then lastly, when we were talking about overpasses, underpass, were we talking with the province at all about wildlife and integrating infrastructure or potentially integrating infrastructure there? Has that been a conversation?
We haven't. We've presented this information to Alberta Transportation from a technical perspective, and they're fine with either option. Both can work. It's just a matter of working through the permit process. And it's only recently that any discussion with Alberta Parks with respect to wildlife fencing has been had. It's not on their radar right now, but I do know that it is a significant concern, and it's something that we've talked with Y2Y about, for example, with this project, and likely we'll come up with the area planning for the Palliser lands. It's going to be a significant consideration up there. So I think there's momentum building towards that conversation continuing.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Now, Councillor Faubert.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Crowsert. Thank you, Mr. Asarte, for your presentation. I know in the past, prior to the COVID, we had done some engagement with the community that were larger town halls that included an aspect around the design of future transportation projects. I found those really helpful in the community because people were able to be present with design and talk to people. Are there plans to do that with this work now that, I mean, it's all, COVID's over?
Yeah, that would be a great forum for presenting. I mean, that's the struggle we've had in doing this work, is usually we'd be out in the community a little bit more in that type of forum on an annual basis and could start to show these things. So we've looked at other online tools, but I think it's worth having the discussion to see if that's something that we can bring back.
Yeah, I just remember being in the basement of the Coast Hotel. There was a large table. It was color printed designs, options, and as a visual person, it really helped me understand the different ways things could change. And in my mind, think about the way I get from point A to point B and the types of changes that would improve that, depending on the mode that I was in. So, but that wasn't a question. That was just encouragement. In terms of this update, the work underway this year and next year is Bow Valley Trail, but not that 17th intersection. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So at the 17th intersection, if we could maybe go back to those options.
Sure.
Sorry, wrong way. So we have option one. What did you I have a couple questions. One, were we factoring in the potential for passenger rail when it comes to designing the intersection near the railway here?
Not this one, no.
Not this one, okay. The roadway that just goes nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
What do we just leave that roadway there? Like what are we thinking for that?
It's, so there are some jogs in Bow Valley Trail, and preliminarily we've discussed maybe land swap to straighten out and make a consistent right-of-way width through there. So it doesn't necessarily need to end up like that. It's just that the concepts for development and access haven't been developed beyond that. Currently, that's how the access works into the area.
Yeah. Are there any talks with the adjacent landowner in terms of their processes for their master planning and how that connects to this transportation planning project?
Only to share plans at this point. And from what I've seen of the plans, they're not actually proposing like a major dramatic change to the area. It's quite a nice development that'll interface well with really a lot of these options. They all work well with it, and that was what our goal was, to confirm that we can give them access in a appropriate way, but this will work quite well with their development.
And then the option where we realign it, was that 3? 4, relocate signal, like, why is this not, like, in terms of your perspective, why is this not the best option compared to option 1?
Primarily because of some challenges with traffic accommodation. Not to say that it couldn't be done, because I mean, it's essentially the first version cleaned up. So I think you'd really have to think through traffic accommodation. How are you going to maintain an operational intersection while at the same time rebuilding all this infrastructure on just like a slight translation? And so, not to say it isn't possible. Maybe you could do a temporary intersection to the north, bringing the roadway up and have temporary signals while you do all this work. It's just less straightforward of a constructability, from a constructability point of view for a project, and would come with the cost of moving everything versus just, you have to move all the sub-base for the lanes versus just narrowing on an existing sub-base and cutting some asphalt out.
What would be the price difference? Like, is it in the...
We haven't fully priced them, but I would guess it'd be a couple $1 million. Yeah.
Like difference between 1 and 4, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. Because, yeah, it's such a difficult intersection that it would be really nice to make it simpler.
Yeah, as part of, prior to bringing this forward to council for future planning, I would suggest that it wouldn't be a significant effort to do more work in terms of just looking at costs and really diving into the pros and cons and thinking about the track operation. So it's something we can plan for before bringing this intersection. We'll do more work to bring options.
I am not afraid of doing something that's more difficult to get a better result. Thank you. That wasn't a question.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Crousert. Thank you, Mr. Sarde, for your presentation. I really am enjoying watching these options come together for Teepee Town after we have approved the new ARP. So thank you for working with that neighborhood. I have a question about the overpass, underpass options. It was my understanding before, but because of the amount of water that we get through that part of Teepee Town and the other side of the Highway 1, that an underpass was not possible. Has that changed, and what has changed to make it a possibility?
That will be an important consideration. The main change is that we have a council-approved project to build mitigation on Stoneworks Creek that will take the flow to the west.
Okay.
And so the project will be to primarily deal with local drainage. And so there'll be a stormwater plan that's required as part of the area, and it's expected that this project could work with that. We may want to give some thought to the what ifs, just to say, is there some flood protection we'd want to incorporate into this to ensure that the flow doesn't come through here and affect a different part of the community. So there would be consideration of it, but the primary change is that we have an approved project for mitigation.
Okay. I really like the fact that we're sort of looking at refining these options before we start the Palliser ARP, because I think that, well, I know that there's important synergies between both of those projects. So I'm happy to see that we're doing this work first. The playground on the hospital grounds, is that our playground or does that belong to the hospital? And when was it last replaced? Is it considered a regional playground, Mr. Camo?
So we need to have, unfortunately, you at the mic, please, Mr. Como.
Come on up. You know I love a good playground.
Yes. Still?
Yeah.
I
Almost
believe,
fitty.
I believe that it is the town's playground. I would have to just check with the Parks Department, the history on it, and how we categorize it.
Yeah, I'd just be interested to see where it is in our rehabilitation, or, I know that we've been doing our playground slowly but surely over time, and I'm just wondering when and if that one's up for redevelopment.
Yeah, I can send a summary of those responses to council after today's meeting.
Perfect, thanks a lot.
Thank you for the guest appearance, Mr. Como.
Perfect. And so outside of what you have articulated today, are there any other projects that you see that would have effect that you would want to have aligned before we start the Palliser ARP work?
The primary piece we're working on right now is working with AltaLink on their planned replacement of their lines. That will have an enormous impact on how those lands develop. And so we've been working with them on options. Recently got through last week an updated submission, and have been working with the landowners and stakeholders there. That piece needs to be fixed, and I think it might be in the Cal report this week, just an update on that.
Perfect, thank you so much, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Asarte. I see no other questions, and so we'll look forward to updates and addressing this again during budget time. Great, thank you. Now, before I call a break, because we're actually going to move into the break next, I did have a question for perhaps Dr. Cottle or Ms. Smithers. I'm going to turn on both mics just in case. Given today is the National Indigenous Peoples Day, and we're talking about Teepee Town, I recognize the historical basis of the name, but have we ever had a discussion with Stoney Nakoda about the name of that neighborhood, as well as, even if it's appropriate, the spelling of Teepee, given that it's not in the language?
So not speaking to Teepee Town specifically, but acknowledging the need for some name changes. Indian Flats is another one that has come up, and I have talked with some members of the Stoney Nation regarding Indian Flats and the potential for a name change there, both for the area and the road itself. And I think part of my learning as we move along our building relationship with the Stoney nations is that the relationship is kind of the underpinning upon which everything else is built. So a lot of the initiatives that are important to us, we've also talked about a space for ceremony and celebration there, and some renaming of neighborhoods and streets and whatnot. They're all things we want to jump on and do because we see them as important acts of reconciliation, and they are. I think, though, shifting our mindset to the way of being or way of doing with the nation is that first it's about fostering that relationship, and then understanding from there where we go and what those next steps are. So something even like taking a name change that could on the surface be a pretty straightforward thing. We need to better understand the significance of the name change and the meaning that would exist both for the nation and ourselves. So it's what appears on the surface to be a pretty quick thing is a long, well, not long necessarily, but it's a process that is based on relationship and understanding. So short answer, yes, we are thinking about it. Long answer, I've just given. It's a process. And I don't know if Dr. Cottle has more to add to that.
No, that's a great answer, thanks. I will add a little bit, which is, the question also of who you consult. Indigenous people, like all other groups of people, are not a monolith and aren't of one mind. So when we still were working closely with elders Sykes Powderface and Buddy Wesley, both of whom are no longer with us, they both were completely fine with Indian Flats and Teepee Town as is, because they were historically significant to them, and that's what they had always called them. So we have had some conversations with elders in those ways, and their reaction isn't the same as what many of our white people reactions might be. Other Indigenous people, through some of the work that the Arts and Events team has done from the Stoney Nakoda, have identified that it's an issue of concern or for them. But with the renaming of Bald Eagle Peak as an example, which is not in the town of Canmore but visible from town, that was a completely Stoney-led initiative, where as a community they came together, agreed it needed a name change, and brought it forward. And so we're taking sort of what Whitney is saying, a similar approach here, which is raising it with them, letting them know that we're open to it, but it's really theirs to lead as a next step, and we're here to facilitate it when they're ready, versus us deciding it's bad and trying to get them to tell us a better name.
Yeah, and with my question, I wasn't making any judgment about good or bad, nor was I making any judgment about ease. My question was, has it been raised? And it sounds like it's been identified. And I understand the importance in building relationships leading to that. And I appreciate that if the ball has been put into their court to tell us otherwise. I'm just thinking that sometimes it's worth continuing the conversation, making sure that something's not a barrier to the building of the relationship. And so I'm glad that it's on the radar. It's always seemed a little bit of a strange name to me, and a throwback to another time of how we refer to things, and I just wanted to make sure that it's not a barrier. Great. So thank you for that. I will call a 15-minute break, and so not by that clock. We will reconvene at 11:25. back. Dr. Cottle, you had something you
I
wanted
did
to
just
add.
have one other thought during the break. As a reminder, next week, Council and some members of admin, along with the town of Banff, are having a Stoney cultural training. And one of the things we can do is send questions in advance around culture and language. So I'm going to raise this issue of names of places in Canmore, both, and ask that they address the history and then also speak to the interest. And the training is coming from the Stoney Nakoda administration about their interest in a name change. It's just a great time to raise that question formally in a new way with that group. So just one more thought about that.
Excellent, excellent. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, we're going now to item D4, and that's Alberta Parks Transit Planning. And Mr. Sardi, you're back for...
I am.
The sequel.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm here on behalf of Ms. Alec, who is unfortunately unable to attend today. She's not feeling well, so I probably won't do this presentation justice, but I think I can get through the update. So, here to talk about the Alberta Parks Town of Canmore partnership on a new seasonal route that's planned for presently 2024. The origin of the route was the early days of COVID, when a number of parks destinations were heavily visited, and Alberta Parks approached the Bow Valley Regional Transit Services Commission and the town of Canmore to start discussing opportunities for intercept parking, transit routes. How can we take some pressure off of particularly areas up towards the Nordic Centre. So based on those discussions, we had, I believe it was a commitment from Parks to seek out grant funding on our behalf towards capital costs for this new route. And on that basis, Council approved in 2021 funds to purchase a bus, which has been purchased and outfitted, funds for a charger, which is in the process of being installed, and approved some capital work around bus stops and route planning. And that was subsequently followed up by Alberta Parks approval of, formal approval of the grant this past spring, and that grant is for $944,000. And that includes operating funds, which is a fairly new development for provincial grants. And that was as a result of the funding coming from operating revenue for the park passes. So all in all, a good synergy, good opportunity. We took advantage and purchased a great new electric bus, and now are planning routes. So primary destinations at the time were really all we had in mind. We had some ideas of where the bus could go in town, thinking Three Sisters, could we do an intercept lot? But we did know that we wanted to go to Quarry Lake, and that parking revenues would fund our portion of the operating. And we wanted to go to the Nordic Centre and Grassy Lakes. And so these are key tourist destinations. We know from our parking program that about 80% of visitation to Quarry Lake is from visitors. So in route planning, we looked at an assessment of potential ridership demand. Where are people parking? Where could we have people park? Could we serve, instead of a parking lot, could we serve visitor accommodation? And looked at route options from a perspective of runtime, population served, and what infrastructure would be required to get a route up and running. Ultimately, we've settled on a preferred route that connects Bow Valley Trail. A significant portion of our medium density visitor accommodation exists along that route. It starts at the visitor center, goes down Bow Valley Trail to the roundabout, picking up Kananaskis Way, and travels then through Spring Creek, Mountain Village into the downtown, and then onward to the destinations up and terminating with Grassy Lakes. And that's servicing 12 existing stops and up to 18 new stops. Just quickly, the other routes we considered were all somewhat variations on this route, and I think this would have emerged right off the hop, but for the route software initially spit out a route time for that route that was over an hour. And so when we looked in detail at the route options, we kept it, but through refining those route options, they found they could actually keep that route under an hour service, or at an hour service by keeping the overall route travel time under an hour. And so each of these, unsurprisingly, each of these alternate routes, which don't incorporate Spring Creek Mountain Village and to varying degrees incorporate Bow Valley Trail, have lesser ridership potential. And this is a look at the number of units that are within a 400-meter radius of those stops, and you can see we're picking up quite an astonishing number of units, considering just the length of the route. So that, as the preferred route, certainly has checks the boxes in terms of the tourist destinations and the opportunity to get ridership, both from locals and visitors up to the Nordic Center. Also, it connects well with existing local and regional routes, and so there's opportunities to serve new areas of the community through transfers, Spring Creek, Central Bow Valley Trail, for example, the hospital, during the seasonal route. Next steps, work is in progress up at Grassy Lakes. They're currently constructing their new parking facility. It has bus facilities incorporated into it to help with turnaround. Our critical path item really is planning out bus stops within the community and getting that infrastructure in place. That in itself is the primary barrier we have, just resourcing to be able to get the planning, design, and construction of those stops done. We have Alberta Parks generally supportive, and Rome is supportive of a 2023 start, which I think would be desirable on all fronts if we were to find a way to make that work. But we're at present resourced in planning for a 2024 start. So we'll continue doing work to plan the stops, budget for them. Bus stops will be approved as part of the budget process. There's already a capital project in the budget. We've got this additional funding from Alberta Parks, so we'll put all those pieces together as part of a capital proposal for the budget process. And that's the update.
Thank you, sir. I certainly would add my voice to those who are interested in a sooner than later start. 2023 is much better than 2024, I believe, especially as we're going to be dealing with, increased visitation year over year. I want to put out a question to you. Maybe it's a challenge, maybe it's an encouragement. Instead of looking this as a seasonal route, has there been any consideration about this being a permanent route that has a seasonal extension? I can see that as affecting our affordability. It addresses more neighborhoods. It gives greater opportunity to get from Bow Valley Trail and Spring Creek in winter months to downtown when some may not want to walk or bike. And it gets around I know the difficulty with hiring drivers is seasonality. Mm-hmm. Full-time is more, not easier, but it's more likely than getting the seasonal driver. And so it just seems to tick so many boxes. And I was wondering, is that even something that can be talked about?
From a planning perspective, we are working with the Commission right now to look at what expansion of Rome could look like over the next 8 years to meet our 2030 ridership goals of the transportation plan. We know that the routes right now are likely insufficient to get there with the ridership growth accounted for. So what other options would we have in terms of what would a build-out routing look like for the community? We haven't put any thought towards whether or not this route would form part of a year-round route, but what I would suggest is that that planning work that we're working with Rome on right now could ask that question and look at whether seasonality makes sense, and then address what the costs would look like and operating impacts, and bring that back to council at a future date to lay out a bit of a roadmap, I guess.
I'd appreciate if that question was asked, and you know, just to further on that, I'm hoping that when we're looking at expansion, especially if, you know, paid parking's rolling out in days, and you know, the excellent comments coming from the community as to, well, I don't have an option of transit coming from Larch or Palliser, or, you know, some other neighborhoods that this would, you know, Teepee Town or Spring Creek, that I think just fits part and parcel. And so to have too long of a delay between those, and I get it, we need to see some results of the paid parking. However, from an affordability point of view, it's not going to get any better anytime soon unless we take bold action. And it's also not going to be something that you know, we can necessarily wait 5 years for. And so I'm hoping that there will be some encouragement there. And you know what, as Councillor Faubert alluded to, I don't think that this council's afraid of doing things that are difficult if it would make things better. And bold is the flavor that we need to be taking in order to address our community issues. And so I see Rome, I love Rome Transit, I love the work that is being done right here, and I want more of it faster, if possible. So I would just you know, encourage that, and thank you for the work that you're doing in this regard. Councillor Faubert.
Give me more transit now. Yes, I guess my question is, what do you need from council in order to move forward in a more advanced timeline on this route?
At this point, I need to spend time now looking at what bus stops are required and to understand how much infrastructure might be needed, and also have been encouraged to look at, is it possible to start with fewer stops and build out as the season progresses. So I think at this point, nothing. I need to spend the time, and going into budget season, I think we'll be in a better position to bring options for what it could look like.
So in terms of our next budget deliberations, that would be a point at time for council to make a decision and give direction.
We will bring some options for what it could look like at that point, yeah. And potentially there could be an option that would require a council decision. Yeah.
I think the fact that we're at the point to add another bus route in our community is fantastic. I'm going to say it again, so be ready. Rome wasn't built in a day. And everything we do to add to transit and mobility and transportation infrastructure in our community builds the system of the future. And I think we are seeing that now. I think with the ridership numbers already this year are approaching like pre-pandemic levels, and we saw that with the increased schedule that we approved in the last budget. So excited to go into the next budget and make an effect on transit. So thank you. And I don't have any more questions.
Ms. Smithers, do you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a reminder to council that we're one of 3 partners in seeing this this additional route happen, right? So we can look at expediting it on our end, but as Mr. Asarte pointed out in his presentation and in the report, it also takes the support of the Transit Commission and Alberta Parks. So it's a joint effort.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That is in the report.
I imagine that this wouldn't affect Alberta Parks' wing of it. It would still be a seasonal on that, part of it. But the rest of it, I'm just wondering if we can take advantage of something that's going into place to make it more long-standing. We've got a lot of questions here. Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you. You mentioned that there was potential for it to start in 2023. Does that change the 3-year pilot at all? Like, would it become a 4-year pilot, or is it still just a 3-year pilot if it did get started sooner?
Still a 3-year pilot. There is some flexibility with the Alberta Parks Grant. So what I anticipate is there'd be an initial approval and then looking at how much grant money is left over and how the route's doing. To answer your question, it would still be a 3-year pilot.
Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Krausert. Mr. Krausert. Get all the names today, don't you? Thank you, Andy. Yeah, I wanted to echo the comments around the seasonality part and what portions could or could not be seasonal as well. I think the mayor said it very, very well. If there was portions of it that were seasonal and the rest of it that was more permanent, I think that would be fantastic. Clarification, the 60 minutes, is that up and back on that route, or is that? Yeah, okay. And I had one more question that eludes my skull all of a sudden.
Well, hit your button again if it comes back to you. Councillor Ma.
Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Sarte. Loving the fact that there's actually connectivity to the hospital. With respect to the folks at the Seniors Lodge, I know they've always wanted, hey, it would be really great to get a stop at the hospital. Is it possible to prioritize when we look at the various stops? Because that seems to be one that is very helpful for a certain demographic. Yeah.
It's a good question, and I suggest I could take that back to the planning process as well when we're looking at build-out of routes. Right now, with this seasonal route, it would require connection in the town center. And so we could work with Rome on what that would look like from coordinating timing. Potentially there's some options there.
Okay, and the electric bus that's coming in, what's its bike rack capacity? I just feel if we're going up to the Nordic Center, there'll probably be people that want to be bringing their bikes up there. Is it the typical 3 in the front, or is it like a couple extra?
The way that the fleet is utilized, it's not necessarily the same bus on the same route every day, so each are equipped similarly. And that's how I anticipate this route to work as well. If we were to find that that was an issue, we could put the question to the commission whether a bus could potentially be dedicated for the route that would have additional capacity. And I know we have looked at that for the, anticipating the Legacy Trail would have high bike use originally.
Yeah.
So I think that's an operational question and one that the commission has some flexibility to address. But right now it's planned to be equipped like the other buses.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
I had a little reboot of my skull there. Worked just great. Some of this funding is based through Alberta Parks and the Kananaskis Pass. If there were any changes to the Kananaskis Pass, do we risk funding of this project?
No. The grant has been granted and the funds are in our hands at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions, thank you very much. It's exciting stuff. So just a note before we go on to councillor updates, we are going to be rescheduling item B1. Bow Valley Victim Services will be coming to visit us another day. Moving to councillor updates. We'll follow our usual process. Are there any questions with regards to my update? Seeing none, any questions with respect to Councillor Faubert's update? I was curious with regards to FCM. Was Councillor Faubert, was there a takeaway or two or a highlight for you?
Yeah, there's a lot of advocacy work to be done for municipalities at both a provincial and a federal level. there are a lot of people who are having the same conversations that we're having here locally. We're not unique, and we don't live in a bubble. A lot of programs are out there that are trying to deal with the same problems that we're dealing with, and there's a lot of knowledge out there to learn from. And it is well worth our time to invest in advocacy work at other levels of government, because that's you. When you start to have those conversations, you can affect change. People might not see it, and it might take a long time, a lot of hard work, but you can move the dial. So I definitely look forward to attending next year in Toronto, and then the year after that in Calgary. And I'm also hopeful that somehow we can get involved at the Calgary FCM and maybe host a study tour or even, I suggested to Mayor DeMano from Banff, establishing a tourism or mountain town caucus, where communities dealing with similar issues that we are from across the country, and there are thousands of communities, we have an opportunity to connect and share best practices and things that work for us. And yeah, so. And Regina was so much fun. You guys missed so much. You'll be so jealous.
I'm sure we did, and thank you for representing us.
You're going to Saskatoon, right?
Yes. All right, moving on to Councillor Graham's report. Any questions there? On to Councillor Hillstad's report. All right. Councillor Ma's report. I have a question.
Yes, Your Worship.
With respect to IRC, in response to, it says, in response to Stone Creek's proposal for a gondola, IRC has provided feedback in terms of reference.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering, was IRC asked to provide that feedback by the planning department?
When we interfaced with Caitlin Van Gaal, we were under the impression that yes.
Okay. Okay. My question then is the town having to do an environmental, isn't that a duplication of effort since it's not really our process? Ms. Smithers.
Thank you. So the current project is a provincial requirement for the environmental impact assessment. It is recognized, though, that at a later date, when development occurs around the gondola, that would be a municipal process where we would typically require an environmental impact statement. So a decision was made between the province and the town to coordinate on the requirements for the environmental impact assessment, thereby requiring the landowner to just do one study instead of two studies that would overlap significantly. And given that the bylaw for the establishment of the IRC, I just forgot the acronym, sorry, does stipulate that IRC is involved in setting the terms of reference. The decision was made that we would have IRC comment on the provincial terms of reference and then provide that feedback to the planning department, which would then be submitted to the province, just given that it is, at the end of the day, the town will be looking to that environmental impact assessment for the same information that we would typically be requiring of our own environmental impact statement.
Great. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Councillor Ma's report. Councillor Mara's report. Oh, Councillor Mara.
I just wanted to do a correction under the Bow Valley Regional Housing. I had my proofreader, Councillor Hillstad, bring it to my attention. It's 16.5, not 15.6 $million to date.
Okay.
I just wanted
And that's
that
under
correction.
the bullet
Under
point
economics, under Bow Valley Regional Housing.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank
Councillor Hillstead.
Just a question on that. So is that something that can be corrected in the official record then when a typo like that is identified? I'm seeing Dr. Cottle nodding her head, so I think that would be important. Thank you. Any question? Any other? Because that was a typo. It's more of an editorial.
It's a typo, yes.
All right. Any questions of the the corrected report of Councillor Mara? All right. Seeing none. Councillor McCallum. Any questions of Councillor McCallum's report? All right then. We'll now move to item F1, administrative updates. And we'll go section by section. All right, starting with section A, question for the CAO's office. Section B, municipal services. Councillor, oh, you're anticipating my next statement. No, C, corporate services. No? Okay. Actually, I have a question going back to municipal services. Around the food truck pilot project, I was wondering if we have any sense as to why we do not have more applications.
No firm sense at this point. I think one factor maybe is that individuals or businesses are choosing to go the development permit route and have food trucks on private lots as opposed to the municipal ones. But I can ask and get back to you with a specific answer if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be helpful, and that makes sense if people are choosing to find a place to set up for the summer or whatever. Great, thank you. Councillor Moore, did you have a question in that regard as well?
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I had to go back to municipal services as well. Mr. Mackay, just a quick update on resident uptake so far on registering for paid parking.
Last time, and it would have been last week, when I discussed with our Protective Services Department, we had over 3,000 submissions to the resident portal. So still a ways to go, but certainly I classify that as fairly strong uptake so far.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
All right, moving to then corporate services, section C. Councillor Graham. Oh, okay. Oh, did you want to ask a question? We can go back.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Mackay, I'm wondering how smooth has the process been for the registration of paid parking? Any feedback, not just on the numbers, but how people are finding it?
Sure. You know, I think on day one we had a temporary glitch for a couple of hours. That was resolved quickly. I'd say overall people are finding it fairly easy to submit. And anyone who needs a bit of extra assistance, we can provide that at the front desk here at the Civic Center or over the phone if needed. But we've only had, I would say, a few of those as opposed to numerous.
How many people are coming down to the Civic Center to manually do their registration?
You know, I don't have an exact number on that, but anecdotally, I wouldn't say it's, we don't have a big lineup at the front desk.
No big lineups, okay. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Moving to section C, corporate services. Any questions? All right. Moving to section D, municipal infrastructure. I had a question as to where are we at with respect to getting started on the Palliser and Town Centre ARPs this year?
We are in the process of interviewing for that senior policy planner position. The posting has been up for quite a while. We were getting limited interest. So we worked with HR to change up some of the requirements for the position in terms of being able to work fully remotely, which did generate more interest. So we're in the process of interviewing, and we'll be assigning the policy work to that successful proponent when we have one.
So we're still anticipating that those ARP processes will start this year?
Yes, I would say one of them for sure, perhaps both. I would have to discuss that with the planning manager to confirm.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hillstead.
With regards to the indoor air quality at Elevation Place, is this just the continuation of the same old issue, or is there some new factors, or how's it all going?
It's a complicated issue. I think that there are a number of variables at play that have to do with humidity, that have to do with the fact that that was a very efficiently designed building from a LEED's perspective, which means there's a lot of circulation of air, which can impact the level of chloramines in the air at any given time, right? Because we're essentially recirculating air. So there are a number of different factors at play in the building that affect the air quality, and we have hired a consultant to work with our facilities team to try to figure out which of the moving parts we can address to affect the most change in terms of improving air quality for users and for our staff.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Section D or any element of the administration updates? Oh, Councillor Faubert.
Is this work covered by warranty from the building of the Elevation Place still?
No.
No? Okay. I know, but it's been ever since. Like there's been...
No.
No?
Right.
Okay, that was the leaky
Let's-
walls.
let's-
Sorry,
let's-
that was the
let's-
leaky walls.
Yeah, let's
For the pool that's not regulation size.
let's allow administration to answer.
No, it's not covered under warranty.
Thank you for letting me ask my question and get an answer.
And I saw Dr. Cottle, did you want to say? No, okay. All right. Seeing no more questions then, we'll now turn to the resolution action list. And there's a couple things I wanted to note here. There's going to be consolidation of some of the motions with regards to 800 3rd Avenue, because that was in fact one motion with several amendments. And so when those minutes come to council at July 5th for approval, there will be the updated wording then, and then those will be replaced. So it will all be consolidated there. That's one item. Secondly is with regards to the strategic plan, once again, we'll see in those minutes when they come to July 5th that there's actually 3 motions that came from the council strategic plan, so that third one will be added. Then I had a question with regards to, I just have to expand it here, old eyes. 219-2021 Lower Silvertip Wildlife Corridor. I was just wondering if there's any movement on that at all.
Our sustainability office is working to secure a facilitator to work with the affected landowners on initiating that plan. It would basically be first getting to a shared understanding of what common goals are, because the town is not the only landowner in that area, and then working with them to develop a plan that all landowners would own from there.
Great.
But that work is underway to secure a facilitator to lead us through that discussion.
Great. And then hopefully those discussions will be following soon after that. Very good. Because I imagine that will be some good information for the ARP in the Palliser area as well.
Yes, it would be an input for sure.
Yeah. Okay. The other question I had, or let's see, comment, with regards to the Land and Property Rights Tribunal, I imagine that that's now done, so it will either be marked as done next time and then it will drop off the list. Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions around the council resolution action list? Councillor Graham.
I had a question from a constituent around the Land and Property Rights Tribunal. Was the appeal or the leave to appeal placed on the website so that people could see it?
I believe it is. I think we have everything there. I just need to confirm. Do you know, Therese? We can check. We can confirm and send a link, but I believe we're placing everything.
It has been up there, yeah. I haven't checked in a little bit. I just thought I'd follow up. Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Noting that, do I need to bring a motion with regards to B1 since we approved the agenda?
Probably we should, just to say that it's being, Andrew, do you know if he's coming in July, or do you have a confirmed date yet?
I can just make it.
Just make it for a later,
okay.
Oh, yes, he has?
Yeah.
July 5th?
July 5th.
If you could move that it's postponed until July 5th?
Okay, I move that item
Happening at real
B1,
time.
the delegation by Bow Valley Victim Services annual update, be postponed until the July 5th, 2022 regular meeting of council. I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And with that, I believe we are done. And so I will move that we adjourn. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.